I didn't realize it at the time, but that camping trip would end up changing my life in a way I never expected. I remember sitting there. Everything was quiet, just looking out. And for the first time in a long time, something felt different. I couldn't explain it then. I didn't have words for it. But something inside me was starting to shift. At that point in my life, things had been anything but steady. And I didn't go into that trip expecting anything to change. But over the course of those days and the weeks that followed, something began to unfold that I never could have planned. And looking back now, I can see it clearly. That was one of the first moments where hope didn't just feel possible. It felt real. And today, I want to take you into that moment. This is Hope Within Reach. When hope feels discovered, the camping trip that changed my life. When I first stepped into Greg and Diane's world, I didn't suddenly feel transformed. I wasn't instantly trusting. I wasn't instantly comfortable. I wasn't instantly changed. I was skeptical. I had already been through instability, uncertainty, loss. So when I walked into their home and heard the rules that everybody eats all meals together and everybody goes to church, my honest reaction was probably something like, oh boy. This was different. And when you've lived through chaos, sometimes stability doesn't feel comforting at first. Sometimes it just feels unfamiliar. But somewhere along the way, I started realizing there was something different about this family. Not because they were flashy, not because they were trying to impress me, but because they were steady. And for a kid who had known so much of uncertainty, steadiness matters. What I remember most isn't one big dramatic moment. It was conversation. Greg was an early to bed kind of guy, but for some reason, he stayed up with me. Night after night, he stayed up and answered my questions. I had a lot of questions. Questions about life, questions about faith, questions about why things happened the way they did, questions about God, questions about Jesus. And Greg never forced anything on me. He didn't lecture me. He didn't pressure me. He didn't preach at me. He just kept answering. Patiently, consistently, honestly. And looking back now, I can see how much that mattered. Because hope didn't come to me first as a feeling. Hope came to me as a person, willing to sit with my questions. And after about 4 months, I realized something. The Jesus Greg was talking about was who I had been looking for all along. Not in a dramatic way, not all at once, just slowly, over time, through conversation, through patience, through relationship. I realized that the hope I had been searching for was found in him. And that realization changed everything. Greg didn't force that. He just showed up. And God used that. There's another part of this story I didn't learn until years later. About 15 years ago, Greg told me something he had never shared before. He said, "Steve, when Diane and I first heard you were coming, we weren't sure we wanted to take the risk." He told me they were actually trying to figure out how to make it a little rough for me, hoping maybe I'd decide not to stay. When he told me that, it surprised me. And honestly, it made me chuckle a little. But more than anything, it deepened my gratitude. Because what I heard in that moment was this: they weren't sure. And they chose me anyway. They opened their door anyway. They took the risk anyway. And that made their impact on my life even more meaningful. Because they weren't perfect. They were just willing. Just a few months ago, I had a moment that brought all of this into focus. At my sister's celebration of life, Greg and Diane were there. And standing there, seeing them in that room, I realized something. That they have been at every major moment in my life. Every single one. And it all started with a 2-week trial. Think about that. 2 weeks. That's what it was supposed to be. Just a short-term decision in the middle of a very uncertain time. But it became so much more. It became family. It became consistency. It became one of the clearest ways I can look back and see how my life was shaped. Then, just a few weeks ago, my foster brother, Kevin, and I went to visit Greg. And there we were, sitting together, decades later. A boy who once entered that home unsure and skeptical, now grown, sitting beside the same man who helped shape his life. And after that visit, Greg sent a text. He said, "Thank you guys for becoming the men you became." That line hit me because he didn't make it about himself. He never has. He just expressed gratitude. And I responded with the simplest words I could think of. I love you guys. Because I do. When I look back now, what I feel most is gratitude. Gratitude that they opened their door. Gratitude that Greg stayed up and answered my questions. Gratitude that they kept showing up. I feel amazement at how life unfolded. I feel humility that someone would invest that kind of care into me. And most of all, I feel love. When I chose that camping trip, instead of going back to St. Joe's Home for Children, I thought I was making a short-term decision. What I didn't realize was that I was stepping in to a family that would shape the rest of my life. I believe God used Greg and Diane to change the direction of my life. And the hope I carry today is because of that. Sometimes we think hope is something we have to go out and find. But looking back on my life, I've realized something different. Sometimes hope finds us through people, through someone who's willing to sit with us, answer our questions, and just keep showing up. If this episode spoke to you, if you've ever had someone show up for you like that, I'd encourage you to tell them. And if you know someone who might need to hear this today, share this episode with them. And make sure you're following Hope Within Reach. Because stories like this are just the beginning. Thanks for listening. And Greg, if you and Diane ever hear this, thank you. I love you guys.